What do I need to be good at to be great at something?
Hello, everyone. You are listening to She Leads with Carly. And in this show, we talk to the absolute best, brightest, and yes, badass leaders.
Tap into where your natural curiosity takes you. Just making sure you're not your own roadblock. Even if you do fall, you're going to fall and you're going to learn.
Together, let's build a DNA of what it takes to rise to the top and truly make an impact. I'm your host, Carly Malatsky. Hello, everyone. I am super excited to welcome our guest today, Renee Dunn. Renee is the founder and CEO of Amazi Foods, a mindful tropical fruit food company that works directly with small businesses and farmers groups in Uganda to make these delicious snacks that are bringing some much needed excitement into the dried fruit category. Amazi originated largely from Renee's college trip to Uganda, where she completed her thesis research. She noticed that there were many delicious local organic fruits, something that wasn't prevalent in the States. However, the local markets had very limited access outside Uganda. The supply chains were broken. Now, Renee is dedicated to building a better supply chain and supporting economic development in Uganda. Fast forward a few more years, Amazi has sourced from over 300 farmers in Uganda, with more than half being women, and is in top retailers like Amazon, Wegmans, and soon to be Whole Foods Market. Renee earned her bachelor's degree in economics in the College of Social Studies from Wesleyan University. And a fun fact, on the side, Renee has also been a fitness guru for most of her life, working as a lead strength trainer and yoga teacher. Renee, I am so excited to have you on the podcast. Welcome.
Thanks so much, Carly. Happy to be here, and thanks for that intro.
Of course, of course. So, Renee, first set the scene. Where are you in the world? Where are you based?
Great question. My friend's favorite question is, where in the world is Renee Dunn? My friend literally just texted me today saying, where are you? I'm in Santa Monica right now. I just got back here a week ago. So, Fair question. And I'm currently based here, but that is very new and recent and evolving.
Okay, very cool. And obviously we'll get into this since I even mentioned in the intro, but how much of your time do you actually spend in Uganda?
I go at least once a year at this point.
Okay.
In the beginning, it was a lot more often, a lot more frequent, but now I usually make at least one trip a year, sometimes two, and yeah.
Okay, amazing.
Yeah.
So Renee, what I love to do, and I'm super excited to learn more about this for you, but tell me a little bit about your upbringing. What type of kid were you?
I am the oldest daughter and only daughter. Oldest, only daughter vibes. Very like self-starting, responsible, all that good stuff.
Type A, all of that.
It's the type. I have two younger brothers. I grew up in Bethesda, Maryland, right outside of DC. My dad worked in DC. Yeah, I think I was always like very quote unquote mature, self-starting. Like my parents love telling me stories about me like filling out my own camp forms, like to go to sleepaway camp. I'd be like, hey, can you guys just like sign here? And I would like write these long things. It would be like, tell us about your child. And I'd write like my own like, Renee can be shy at times, but like make sure you like, I would just, like very like self-aware, self-reflective, but also very expressive as a kid. Loved musical theater growing up, did well in school, did my homework, was a good girl.
Self-motivated. No, I understand. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah, and definitely like a little quirky with the musical theater. Those kids are always characters. But yeah, that was me. Yeah.
Amazing. And given where you are now, the path that you ultimately ended up choosing, can you pinpoint parts of your childhood that actually it makes sense? There's a trail that you can follow?
Yeah. And I think the trail definitely got disrupted along the way. Like we took some turns. I guess when I feel most in alignment, like I know that as a little kid, I was super creative, super expressive. I was a little mobilizer. All that feeds into what I do now. I remember like doing certain camps growing up and like, for example, like my mom is German Israeli. over the summers, we would go to Israel, and I would spend the summer in Israel. And I remember like you could choose, I would go to a day camp in Israel and you could choose your like specialty. And one of the themes I chose was like, I think it was like production or something. I don't really know what they had us doing, but like we had to come up with a commercial. And I just remember being so into it and so excited and like director mode, and everybody just like eyes glazed over, like totally like, don't really know where you're going with this, but you seem excited about it. And
you have a vision, you're fulfilling the vision. That's it.
Mobilizing, so like definitely that, I think I've always had that passion. I think unfortunately the true slog of entrepreneurship, like that doesn't come out as often as I would like, but I do think that's kind of what always led me to like take a non-traditional path, throughout college and after college. Just definitely like never really did the proper 9-to-5 life. I like did it in an internship capacity for a little while, but like ended up hodgepodging a bunch of different things. And that's just kind of how I've always rolled. So yeah, I think, that kind of carries through for sure.
And okay, we're going to get into all of that, but even before, you and your brothers, you seem to be all in very different industries.
Yeah.
Right? I think one of your brothers in the NFL.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that and the different dynamics, and if anything, the values that you think your parents have instilled in you that was super important.
So my brother Michael is in the NFL. He plays for the Browns. He's a lineman. And then my youngest brother did his master's in data analytics. I actually recently employed him for a project to help us out. But he lives in Arlington and super smart, super sweet, the best. Definitely more like a gamer. And I think my parents always have let us do our own thing. I think we all have been in our own ways, good kids, so to speak, right? So they kind of, I think in many ways, trusted us and supported us to pursue what we wanted. I think there was a lot, especially, I'll speak for myself. I do think that we do joke that every child got a slightly different version of the parents, which often happens in the family. But I do think that there was never any really pushback when I did want to do something. It was kind of just as long as you work hard and do well and follow through. I think integrity was really important. And at least I got that from my mom. I think a lot of my grandparents were Holocaust survivors. So I do think there was a good amount of the work ethic, but also the gratitude, that's kind of instilled from that next generation down of
absolutely,
this is what they built. This is what they came back from. That was kind of used as a source of inspiration in the family. And, just wanting to do, I guess, quote unquote, right by them was something that I feel I was taught very early on. Just with regards to travel also, my mom is German. My dad traveled for work all the time. We went to Israel every year. We were so lucky I traveled with my dad actually to Uganda when I was in middle school. So I think we were just really taught to just jump into new experiences and cultures and try new things, try new foods. I always joke that we didn't do gifts much. I'm so bad at gifting birthday gifts. Sorry, I'm terrible, but I'm a huge experiences person.
Yeah.
Long answer short, I do think that encouraged each of us to figure out our own path, because we saw a lot of non-traditional stuff sort of modeled for us in many ways.
Yeah.
It wasn't really a book or plan to follow. It was kind of just okay, cool. Go ahead.
I love that. And it's funny, Renee, even as you're talking, so many of the things that you just mentioned actually resonate with me and my upbringing and traveling. And I think there's a lot of value in it. And even the fact, as you said in the beginning, it may not even seem like a concrete or value, but having trust in you guys, right? And just being you know what, that probably instills that self-motivation that you've carried on. So I think that's awesome. And so you mentioned traveling, and I want to get into that because it seems like that was such a core part of your journey up until now. So take me actually through college you did your thesis research in Uganda, or brought you to Uganda. Or tell me a little bit more about that. What was first? How did it happen?
I was a double major in college. One of the majors was the College of Social Studies, which is an interdisciplinary major. Wesleyan is kind of liberal arts college. They're kind of known for hodgepodging things, like creative things. And one of the majors is called the College of Social Studies. It's like social theory, government, history, and economic theory. And it's very intensive. It's like, the joke is it's called the College of Suicidal Sophomores because your sophomore year is like rough. It's like you do these big comprehensive exams,
Wow.
But then basically from the first super structured year, it kind of turns into this, like, you create sort of your focus within that. And so I knew I wanted to study abroad. I always knew that. And I had been really interested in quote unquote development work. Like I went to Malawi with one of my dad's friends in high school. I went to Uganda with him. I went to Tanzania with him. So that region of the world I'd been to before, and I was interested in it. And I'd done like research projects on certain things. And I kind of just had the thought of like, I have been so privileged to be able to travel throughout my life. I'm sure I will have the opportunity to, go to Europe, whatever. Yeah. Although at this point, I still haven't done a lot of Europe. So, but I was kind of like, I want an immersive experience. When else am I going to have the opportunity to spend 5 months or so in a region that I'm new to, don't know much about, would love to learn the culture and not just be like someone visiting and going on safari.
Right.
One of the programs at Wesleyan was a development economics program. And it was in Uganda, and it was very immersive. We had homestays. We learned the local language. We traveled all around the country. And after having that study abroad experience, that's when I sort of got the idea for my thesis around local entrepreneurship and just seeing how the environment business-wise and entrepreneurial-wise was so different from in the States. And I saw so many mismatches between what we learned in quote unquote development here and how problems are being solved versus like how things actually happen and work. And so that's when I was inspired to like apply for a grant to go back to do my thesis research my senior year. And I did that over the summer and put my thesis together.
In that first trip, then you discover that, okay, I want to study deeply local entrepreneurship development. When did that actually translate into, oh, there's a significant gap here that I want to fill? Where did that process and that almost seedling start to enter?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely thought a lot about it during my thesis, right? When I was putting it together. I think just premise-wise, I studied formal entrepreneurship and just learned so much about how we have all these top-down micro enterprise approaches to trying to create opportunities for people in quote unquote developing economies. But what you end up with is a super highly competitive local environment. There's not a lot of access to markets that are high value, that will allow for value addition and infrastructure. It's all very much like locally based, culturally based, and while that is great for creating earnings potential for people, it doesn't allow for differentiation, for growth, for job creation. And on the food sector of things, this is where I really got struck, was like, how is there stand after stand after stand after stand of people selling tomatoes? All selling the same thing. How is there jackfruit sitting on the roadside? How do you expect to sell all your goods at the end of the day if everybody's selling the same thing and things are going to waste? You see it happen on the roadside. I don't know. I think I kind of just like had this, it bugged me. And like, I think my first job out of college was working at the Aspen Institute. And that was like 3 days a week. It was considered an internship. And simultaneously, I was doing wellness stuff. Like I was doing corporate wellness and yoga and all this stuff. And it was kind of the perfect mishmash of like two things of like sort of one hand and foot in like the wellness, better for you space, and one foot in kind of trying to solve these problems in more institutional ways. And I think just when that internship ended and I was managing the yoga studio, I was like, well, maybe I just do wellness for a while. And I think I remember one day I was just like walking on the street. I think I was like 25, and I was just like talking to a friend of mine, and I was like, I think I'm going to make plantain chips. I just was like, I think I just had this moment where it was like, I just kept thinking that like, okay, I didn't want to fully do yoga right now. That didn't feel like everything that I wanted to do. But I also didn't resonate with the existing ways of like dealing with the issues that I saw.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, why don't I try to come up with a solution? I was, 24, 25 at the time. I could live at my parents' house. So I was kind of like, okay, like now's the time. And honestly, fully expected it to fail. Like I was like, I will go to Uganda. I'll try to make things happen. It probably won't work, and I'll come back. Like that was my vision.
Okay. So first of all, this is great. And I think it's something that is so prevalent and very relatable to other people early in their careers, especially. And so take me through that time, even like a step before, where you were kind of one foot in wellness, one foot in, development and that type of world. Was it an anxious time? Like, were you ever freaking out of like, what should I do and how to navigate that? Or was it like almost, you know what, I'm young, I'm at a place in my life where I could kind of see what to do. Like, how were you mentally feeling during that moment?
Oh, I was stressed. Like I think I left college thinking I was a failure because I didn't do like economic consulting. Like
Wow.
I did a lot of those applications, some of the ones where you like get so far in the interviews that they like fly you in and do all this fancy stuff for you. And then I didn't get a job. And I was like, in my mind, I was like, it wasn't happening. I think I don't like this. I don't feel this way anymore. But at the time, I think I also was like, because I got this fancy college degree, I was like, well, I couldn't possibly do yoga full time. Like, I think there was also some judgment around that probably going on in my brain. And so I was like, I definitely need to like stay stimulated in this area. Like, I'm still interested. And there was a lot of back and forth, but I think like, again, I was sort of used to just like hodgepodging thing. I started an organization in college too. Like, I think I already had understood that I was doing things like differently.
A little differently than others.
So,
Yeah.
So I was kind of like, well, this will just be another pivot. And then at the very least, I'll build my resume and like figure it out. I don't think I really knew nothing about the food industry, truly nothing. Aside from like the fact that I loved grocery shopping, I loved studying what was on shelf. I paid attention to all the trends. I had a food Instagram at the time, so I think I knew that I was like, oh, this could be so fun, like cool idea. And like, I thought, based on the connections I had in Uganda, I was like, I could find some people who would be excited to do this. So anyway, I think it was just like a combination of naivete and confusion and stress. And then just kind of being like, well, I feel kind of dead end. And so I'm just going to do this. And I think I've always been of the notion that like, it's similar to the idea of like the worst thing that can happen is you get a no kind of thing. It's like, if this doesn't work, I'm not any further behind. Like, I'm still stuck. Like if I'm still stuck,
I totally understand.
Yeah.
And it's funny because, looking now, it's probably refreshing to see where you are versus, being like easily comparing yourself to others who are in economic consulting, right? And like who do have these jobs, and it is stressful to see the surroundings versus like where you are. Would you agree that a good signal for you at 25 years old to be like, you know what, I'm going for this, it seemed like it was an all-consuming thought. Like you were thinking about it a lot. It was a mix of passion and seemed like there was a real need. Would you agree with that? Is that how it seemed like?
Yeah, it was definitely something that like constantly was like popping up in my brain. And I don't think I really put it together as like that's an option until I was just like talking to a friend on the street. And I just remember she was going through a job transition or something, or she was moving. And then I kind of was like, I could make plantain chips. Like it just like, it just kind of just was like, oh, I guess that's something that I could do also. So, yeah.
So tell me now about those early days. who did you have, like, how did you create these plantain chips, right? Like, how did you learn about that process? And ultimately, who was giving you that feedback that, Renee, this is great, or no, like back to the drawing board?
We had much back to the drawing board. So I'm not 25 anymore. I'm now 32. So this was like 7 or 8 years ago that I first started, like had the idea, got on a plane back to Uganda. And so all that is to say, it took me like 3 or 4 years to like get to a point of like good enough product and supply chain. And then even still, I feel like only in the past 2 years did we really start to get like consistent good feedback. Like I think I think our product was good, 4-ish years ago. So, but like we've been through so many iterations, and it's just been a slow slog of a journey of like learning along the way. To answer your question, like I really didn't know what to do. And I think my biggest like fake it till you make it moment was actually my first week ever of trying to do this, which was I posted up at a trade show. I landed in Uganda. 2 days later, went to an agricultural trade show, created a sign. My friend like made a logo for me, and I said I was an importer. Like I was like, yeah, I import things. And then I actually met my first producer at that trade show. It was not the right model for us at the time, but it at long term, but it got me started, right? So I initially started by, I met her at the trade show. She told me she made dried fruit. So the first month or so, I was like, can I just see how you do it? Can I come to the facility? Can I come with you on farm visits? And she was super helpful. And after like a month or so of learning and like seeing how they did things, going to farmer meetings, I kind of was just like, well, could we maybe buy from you? I wanted to come up with my own product ideas, but I was like, can we buy in bulk? And you guys produce it. And so actually for the first 2 or 3 years of my business, that was the model. I would go to Uganda 2 or 3 times a year. I would do recipe development. I would bring back bulk stuff. We'd hand pack it in the US. Like when I say we, I mean like me, my dad, some friends, a couple interns. And I would just like get feedback, go back to Uganda, work on the recipes, come back. And so that was like literally how I started. And we used to just like air freight like big bulk, like 50-pound boxes to a commercial kitchen and just like package them at night. And it was like the most hodgepodge.
No, it's scrappy. Yeah. Like that's the reality of it.
Yeah.
And Renee, you mentioned how it took 4 years to at least like there was a slow start, which again, I think is also quite common and things that we, at least from the consumer side, don't see that side of the story. And do you most attribute that to maybe like the marketing side? Like it just wasn't getting out there in the right way? Or is it the actual product and the food? And how do you think about that?
I think it was all of it.
Okay.
This industry is so hard. If I knew what I know now, I don't know if Amazi would exist, quite frankly. Like this week beat me down. I'm just like it's a lot, especially, and I do think especially for like a one woman situation. I think one of the toughest things was probably, and this is still actually one of our bigger picture problems to date, but like because we've made such a different supply chain, keeping up with like the needs of the supply chain do not always align with the needs of what it takes to grow a small business on this side, right? In the US, like I would highly recommend like you go slow, iterative, get a small cluster of stores, go back to the kitchen, use that money, make a little more. Once you have enough demand, you go to a co-packer. Once you have that, like that's the very traditional, approach. But when you're making product overseas, right, you can't just go back to the kitchen and make some more, and so and then you have seasonality, you have farmers' expectations, you have all that stuff. So I think it was also just like every time I started to get interest on the US side, I'd be like, wait. Then I have to go back to the Uganda side and be like, okay, we have to do all this stuff. And then I'd come back and like, so it was always like this back and forth. especially in the beginning when we didn't have our supply chain set up yet. Now our supply chain looks super different. So we actually didn't come up with our current model until like 3.5 years in. It took some time.
Okay. In those early days, you mentioned how, you have your dad, you have some interns, friends helping you pack it. But at the end of the day, you were the one-man show. And I just have to, like, how did you do it? How did you maintain some type of mental, sanity, if you will, and not just be like, you know what, is this worth it? Like, why not just do something else?
Yeah. So I still struggle with that.
Yeah. I'm not surprised.
I honestly, when you also ask what took so long or like what was the hardest thing, I actually think like my mental space and like everything you go through as a founder, all the second guessing, especially like in your 20s, there's already so much that we're learning about ourselves at that time. We're becoming our own people. Like we're learning that we're now maybe adults. Like, I don't know, but like, I don't know, when did that happen? I don't want to say me in my own way per se, but I had to, and I still do have to work through a lot of like, it's especially if you are somebody who is prone to anxiety or is prone to depression or is prone to anything, like you're going to get in your own way. And so I do think a lot of it was like just not knowing what to do next or getting stuck or second guessing. So yeah. And I mean, also just like without all that stuff too, it's like you get through one hurdle and you have to learn the next one. Cause again, totally. I have no background in this industry. So, I definitely tried to find as many people and resources around me, but honestly, I don't really recommend doing what I did as a solo founder. I think like to this day, that's still one of the hardest things is that I don't have my like COO to take on the ops stuff. Like I'm still always pivoting and it often means you can't go as fast. Obviously pros and cons, founder, co-founder, like all that stuff. But transparently, like I think that's still one of the hardest parts of the whole thing.
No, absolutely. I think, and mind you, I think that's hard any form of entrepreneurship as well, right? And you mentioned that concept of second guessing yourself. How important has it been for you to almost be able to take advice from others, but at the same time block out the noise and trust your gut? Has that come up a bunch?
Yeah, that's been a big lesson. I actually very recently got diagnosed with OCD. The way it was explained to me was that it can manifest as obsessive doubt. So you know something to be true or you believe something about yourself, but you think of all these ways that like it might not be true. And so having that layered on top of exactly what you're describing has been like one of the hardest, most crazy making things for me because, and I share that just because like I actually went through a couple really bad instances of asking too many people for advice and getting so far away from what I knew to be the right decision that I at one point had to just be like, actually, I'm going to have like a few months of no advisors. Like I'm not going to talk to anybody. I'm just, because I had to basically like train myself to not ask other people after some time because it did get to this point where things were so cloudy that like I just didn't know what was true. Like even like in my gut, like I was so disconnected because every time something would come up, I'd ask this person, I'd ask a consultant, I'd talk to this person, and then there was a situation where I got kind of taken advantage of and, kind of learned the hard way of like, I never wanted to do that. Like that wasn't my idea. And I just kind of always thought other people knew better. And so I think especially as a young woman in the space too, like it's multiple layers.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But yeah, just having to kind of like learn how to gut check myself has been definitely something I've learned through this business.
And I'm so glad you mentioned that because I'm sure what's so easy to do is maintain that 25-year-old mindset, right? Where you feel you don't know anything because you probably like it's all so new. But realistically, now you've been in it for, 7+ years where you probably know way more than you give yourself credit or than you think.
Yeah.
And so I think that's it's such a good point though, of just like being mindful of that and recognizing it while going out and trying to, consult others in decisions that you honestly probably know best. So
Yeah.
that's super interesting. If you were to if someone could have told you about what this journey would have been like what would you have needed to hear?
That's a good question. I mean, I guess a couple things are coming up. Like one thing that I've been coming back to a lot recently, and shout out to my friend Ashley, who's also a founder, who mentioned this symbol. But entrepreneurship and life in general is like an infinity sign, right? You're up and then you're down, you're up and then you're down. It always, what goes up, what comes down, what goes up, comes down. And when you're in something, at least for me, it feels like you are in it, and it feels like you're never going to get out of it again. And it feels like the world's biggest crisis, for me. And then when the highs happen too, it's like, it's all fitting together. You like want to hold on to it. And honestly, looking back, like at and those things all feel so real. But looking back at the moments that we got so stuck, I think it's like, I think coming back to that and trying to remember, like, it feels like duty, but honestly, in 6 months, you won't even remember this. Honestly, maybe in 2 weeks, you won't remember this. Like it just,
wow.
You go through so much on a weekly basis. Like I actually also mental health. Like I used to see a therapist every other week. And I remember being like, I feel like I've lived 2 lifetimes between the time. Like, and then I had to go every week for a while. And then I went back to every other week. But like, I was just like, I can't even possibly tell you what has come up because I don't even remember 2 weeks ago. That's a really good lesson to try to hang on to, is to not get sucked into like wherever you are on that roller coaster ride. And I'm saying this to myself now because this still happens to me, but like,
yeah,
it is just like that all the time. And
absolutely.
And I think just the sooner you can just like do your best and move on, like that's the best thing to do. And again, unfortunately, that's not always my response. But I think it is, if I knew that early on and kept it in mind, like that would have saved a lot of time. And I think also just reminding myself that like, you're not going to know and you're never going to know. And you can only make decisions based on what's in front of you. Like no one can tell the future. And I think just taking the burden off of yourself, if you can, on like trying to get everything right is always a good tool to have.
Tell me now, for Amazi Foods, you, at the beginning at least, decided not to take external financing and it was more bootstrapping it. Mm-hmm. Was this an intentional decision? Walk me through that thought process and ultimately how that, affected the trajectory of the company.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was a factor of a few things, right? So I think number one is that this whole idea was so precarious that I was just like, quite frank, I literally never thought that this would turn into a business. Like everything is set up in a way in Uganda that like this would not work. Like, so I think I just thought it was some fun little pipe dream and like I'd do my best and figure it out. And like, but things kind of just kept rolling along. So I was like, okay, well, we're going to keep going. I haven't gotten a no yet. So like going to keep going. So I think that was one factor, is that I never sat back and was like, let's accelerate. I was kind of just like, always like, oh, here we go. I think the other thing is that I wouldn't consider myself like a skilled fundraiser, right? Like I maybe I should shift that a little bit, but like, I don't have a background, right, in finance or in the CEO type thing. I didn't go to business school, and I never really got a crash course really in like raising. And I felt like every time I went to these like courses on how to raise capital, it just felt like not right. Like it just didn't feel right at the time. And so I think I just never did a proper raise in that regard. And also back to the solo founder thing, like every time you do a raise, that's all of your time and energy. And so sometimes what would happen is I would like start it, I'd get a little bit of capital from the, convertible notes, and then kind of be like, that's enough to keep going, and then like keep going. So I think it's like a little bit of all that. So I don't know if it was ever necessarily like a super conscious, like I don't want to raise capital. And I think every time that I tried to more formally, it was more so because I felt like I was being told that I had to. Like I felt like I had to, because that's what and quite frankly, like you need a lot of capital in this space. So part of me is like, to answer your second question about how it would be different, like it would be different. But I think it also was a factor of like, I'm super lucky to have had access to capital, friends, family. I got an SBA loan. I had some savings that I've been able to tap into. So I have brought in some angel investing, but for the most part have been able to stay pretty close to my network and take it in small tranches. Like over the past 8 years, I've raised a total of around $1 million, like in that whole time. So it's just been the way it's gone, and pros and cons.
No, totally.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you mentioned as well, because I don't think people understand or realize that, especially as a solo founder, when you are fundraising, everything else essentially is halted, right? And like sometimes with co-founders, one person can continue building out the product and still build while the other one's focused on fundraising. But you're right, like it ultimately changes the trajectory, whether it's short term or not, but still it does affect things in that regard.
Totally.
And so Renee, tell me, when you think about your entire journey of Amazi Foods up to now, what have you learned most about yourself through that journey?
I've learned that I'm really hard on myself. Yeah, really hard on myself. I've gotten a lot better at it over the years, because I've had some moments where I've really surprised myself, and it's crazy just how much time behind the scenes I'm thinking that I'm doing something wrong or second guessing myself, even still, like, just like learning that, and then trying to invite a little more grace and play into my life in areas outside of the business as a result. Like I think a few years ago, I went through like a really tough time with everything, and I kind of like major burnt out. And I think kind of since then, like my approach to the business has been a little different. It's kind of like, this is a long game. It's been a long game. Let's not kill ourselves today. Like, let's not do that. So I think that's been like a pretty big lesson.
As you were saying that, the word that kept coming up for me was kindness, like showing kindness to yourself. And you essentially said that, right? Giving yourself more grace and kindness. But I think that's also so important, and something that founders, at least how I've learned about it, needs to show that. So I'm glad that you recognize that. At least that's probably the first step.
Yes,
exactly. By the way, how did you come up with the name? Where did that come from?
Oh, fun. Yeah, that's a twofer. So before, when I was like first coming up with like initial bags to like sell, I built like a Squarespace website. I did a little survey. I got like 80 to 100 responses of like different Ugandan words, like words in the local language, that I thought were like related to the agricultural supply chain. That could be like fun names for the brand. And in my mind, I had a name, and it was Nuungi, Nuungi. And at the time, I saw your face. Like at the time, people were like, is that a fungus? And I was like, oh, I guess that name does not work. But Amazi was one of the names, and it means water. It means water in Uganda. And the idea is that like water is the heart of growth. We're growing agricultural supply chains from the ground up. You can't grow without water. And I think I chose it because of that symbolism, but also because it was the only one that people like had a positive name association with, because we still get a lot of times Amazi. So like people be like, oh, Amazi, like amazing. And I'm like, yep, sure. Like a positive word association. Yeah. So, or like amazing Amazi, so at the very least, like if people say it wrong, they're not going like, ew, is that fungus? They're saying, oh, it's amazing. So
Right.
it was a twofer. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. And then, so Renee, what I love to do at the end of my episodes is ask more fun questions, maybe not necessarily fun, but more thoughtful. So I want to ask you this, which is, and we've kind of talked about it, but actually, how do you define success, and how has that changed for you over the last maybe 5-10 years?
Yeah, it's definitely evolved.
Yeah.
I think right now for me, it has a lot to do with alignment and interconnectedness.
Okay.
Like feeling like I am in stride. I'm doing things that challenge me and are to my potential, and feel like they allow me to live a life that I want to live, whether that's lifestyle balance, whether that's, you know, how I'm showing up for people, how I'm showing up for the world. Like that's become like more and more important to me. Like at this phase, like, you know, I don't really know what the future of the business holds, like, but I'm, for example, open to like strategic partnerships or an acquisition that would like allow for me to serve in a way that I feel like I can serve, even if it means like I'm not solo founder anymore. Like I'm not attached to that idea. Like I'm not attached to like a big exit or like me, you know, always being the CEO. You know, I'm not saying that I want to like peace out right now, but I'm saying like, I think for me, it's like, as long as I'm doing and contributing my skills, like working toward that is really like what I'm trying to do, and feels like success for me right now. Yeah.
I want to know, did that realization where almost the separation between Renee Dunn as a person, as a human, versus Renee Dunn, the founder CEO of Amazi Foods, did that come from you? Was that just your own type of self-exploration, or did someone, maybe a therapist, did someone say to you, you know, Renee, like you're not Amazi Foods, like you could fulfill that purpose in another capacity?
It was a combination. Like, I mean, no one's ever really said that to me per se, but I've had a couple, I mean, it's been 8 years, right? And so, you know, and I've been doing things on the side, as you said in the intro, like I've worked other jobs on the side, especially more in the beginning. But like I've had a couple burnout periods along the way. And I feel like my most recent one was really just like, I don't want to keep doing this if it means that I can't be a person. Like we live one time, right?
Absolutely.
So I'm definitely not the founder that's the like growth at all costs, like grind culture type person. Like, don't get me wrong. Like I've been working fucking hard. I don't know if I'm allowed to curse on your podcast, but
you're good.
But I also, you know, like I'm also not, if it doesn't work, it's not me. Like if it doesn't work, it's not because I could have been grinding more. Like, and maybe it is, but like that doesn't matter. Right. So like, and I think at the end of the day too, like given that we are a social enterprise, like it's really also not about me. Right. Yeah. Like if there is somebody who can grow things in a way that's better than what I've been doing, or there's a new opportunity that looks different than what it does now, like I'm open to that. And so for me, every decision moving forward and like in general, a lot of what I'm decide to do has to do with our supply chain. Let's say like a big company comes along and they're like a massive global fruit distributor, and they're just like, we just want to scoop up your supply chain. We're going to do this, all this for your people in the next 2 years. I wouldn't say no. I would love to find a way to keep growing the brand Amazi within the umbrella, you know, for example. So like, that's just an example of like, I'm not married to like Amazi, the brand. Like I need to like 10X this thing. I'm married to like, what can I do to maximize?
Absolutely.
What everybody is here going for here.
And first of all, like it's so refreshing and so great to even mention it, because one, I think so many founders go through this, and not only that, going back to even, only daughter, oldest child, like all of those attributes, I know for sure that it's not easy to, it probably heightens the founder experience and associating, you founder of Amazi with versus like you successful as a person. So I really I think it's so honest and vulnerable. So really, I appreciate that. And Renee, is there a book that you are obsessed about that maybe others need to read and understand?
I'll name a couple, but I'll say broadly what I love about like my genre or like what I love to read are books that show perspectives and life experiences that are separate from mine, to really just show like everyone's on their own path. And so I guess like I like a lot of like kind of memoir-ish books. Like Educated is a great book. Homegoing is a great book. Homegoing is beautiful. Transcendent Kingdom. I recently read On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous. These are all like mostly like in the memoir fictional space, but they are like based in like real experiences from people who are either in the queer community or other nationalities or whatever, and coming to America,
That's
and
awesome.
just like,
yeah, I'll check them out.
All those books just always have messages that really, really resonate with me. And again, just like, I think we get so caught up in at least I'll speak for myself, so caught up in what we're doing, what's in front of us. This is like all consuming, blah. It's like really important to read other people's perspectives and be like, you can be on the same planet Earth and have just like, and I think it grows compassion too. Like
totally.
Just like, so anyway, those are not business books, but they're great.
That's great. That's excellent.
And I love them.
Okay. My last question, which I think we actually went into quite a bit, but in case you have almost a focused, what is a craft that you are spending a lifetime honing?
Living in alignment. Like, I think, just being comfortable. Like, I mean, this is so trite, but I think this is like what everybody is looking for, is to better understand themselves in this lifetime, to live the fullest of them. And so I think I'm just learning to be more and more comfortable with that over time, but definitely doesn't always feel comfortable. So I think that's kind of my life's work.
I love it. I love it. Renee, it has been such a pleasure having you on She Leads. Really, your honesty, everything about it is amazing. And I just know for a fact it'll really resonate with so many people. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much, Carly. This was a really fun conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to the show this week. If you enjoyed, please spread the word. Tell someone about She Leads or post about it on social media and tag us. If you want to contact us, feel free to send over a message through the She Leads Instagram page at sheleads.show. If you want to follow us on Twitter, our account is at SheLeadsShow and mine is at Carly Malatsky. This episode was produced and edited by Nick Verschow. Thank you also to our partner, Floodgate. If you're passionate about startups and want to learn more about the starting journey of those who have built groundbreaking companies, I highly recommend listening to Starting Greatness with Mike Maples Jr., the founding partner of Floodgate. He has an incredible show that, in my opinion, is definitely worth your time. Thanks again.